Hello and welcome to the Q&A for the latest issue of the Rule Investment Letter with me, Paul Harris, your host, and joining me, Rick Rule. Hi, Rick. How are you?
Hi, Paul. I'm well. Congratulations on another great issue. The feedback that we've gotten from the initial distribution, it's been fantastic. Literally dozens of emails to me concerning the high tone of the letter. So nice work.
Well, thank you very much. Issue number 6 was about Canada's Yukon territory, which is our first look at a specific region from an investment theme point of view. And it's based on a visit there I made in early August, in which I had the opportunity to visit 4 or 5 projects and meet a whole bunch of other people that are active in Yukon as well. While many major gold miners have seen their share prices increase by 100% over the past year, some of the companies I've visited are up 400%, although with the caveats that they pose higher risk or have higher risks and have lower liquidity. This is a Q&A, so please submit any questions you have in the Q&A tool. Rick and Albert Liu conduct a weekly Q&A. So for general questions about stocks in the industry and specific commodities, please save your questions for that one. Be good if you can direct your questions for this Q&A to the companies we're talking about today and the Yukon territory in general. As a reminder, you can subscribe to the newsletter via Substack at realrickrule.substack.com. Now, I suppose the first question, I'll ask it to myself, a rhetorical question: why do we do this? Site visits give one the opportunity to load up on soft information that rarely makes it into a corporate presentation or news release, such as seeing the lie of the land, the infrastructure, and aspects that may affect development timelines, cost, and permitting. They also allow one to spend time with the people driving a project forward, to get a feel for how enthusiastic and knowledgeable they are or not, and to talk with other people in the region and get their view on things in general. The main visit that I undertook was with Rural Symposium company Banyan Gold, which issued a resource update in July during the Rural Symposium and has a PEA, a preliminary economic assessment, coming at some point in the near future. A key factor of interest here with this particular visit is what is happening with its neighbour, Victoria Gold's Eagle Mine. Victoria Gold went into receivership last year after a heap leach incident, and it went into the hands of the receiver, PricewaterhouseCoopers. The government is very keen to get a new owner for that and to get the Eagle Mine back into production. So that was a key topic of conversation during the visit. Victoria Gold was a potential buyer for Banyan Gold, and whoever takes over the asset, which the government hopes will be determined this year, may be a potential buyer for Banyan Gold going forward. Banyan is not leaving its fate in the hands of others, however, and its latest resource contains a higher grade area that could be a starter pit and a milling operation. Victoria Gold owned a royalty in some other aspects of Banyan Gold's Ormac project. Banyan has now renegotiated some of those terms with the liquidator, PricewaterhouseCoopers, which will improve project economics. I'm not sure all of those details have been released publicly, so I won't be mentioning those too much today, but the company has taken advantage of the situation to improve the economics of its project. Rick, let me bring you in here. Banyan Gold was a participant in the Real Symposium. The company share price has gone up quite nicely since then in the past month or two. What is it about Banyan Gold that you like?
Well, I liked relatively good access, relatively good community support, and I like the size. They are talking about 7 million recoverable ounces. Paul, as you know, I have a fondness for big as opposed to small projects. I like the fact, too, that the share price had earlier this year declined as a consequence of the bankruptcy of Victoria Gold, which in fact impacted all of the development projects in the territory, which is one of the reasons why I was so enthusiastic about you going up there. I love share price declines that occur for reasons that I believe are temporary and transitory. And I think the last 60 or 90 days has proven that those share prices declines were transitory. The grade that you're talking about 20 years ago wouldn't have worked, but increases in the gold price, increases in technology, easier financing terms over 20 years suggests to me that this deposit is economic, and I believe that the deposit grows. I think you're seeing along this belt with Victoria and Banyan a camp as opposed to a couple of deposits, and that attracts me. Like yourself, it wouldn't surprise me if whoever ends up with Victoria consolidates Banyan. It makes perfect sense to utilize joint infrastructure to the extent that one possibly can. I'm also very attracted to the energy and intelligence of the CEO of Banyan. I found her to be persistent, tenacious, smart. I think she has what it takes to move this company to the finish line, wherever that finish line may be. If she has to finance this thing to production, I think that she is absent ego enough that she will bring in a COO who's a mine builder. I don't think she'll try and do it herself, which is great. That would terrify me. But I think she is the right one to shepherd this project through Yukon sociology and politics and through capital markets. I think she can get the job done, whatever the job ends up being. I'm broadly attracted to the Yukon too, in the sense that a couple of companies that you weren't able to visit this trip, but you'd been to before, both Fireweed and Snowline, have deposits that seem to me to be absolutely tier 1 deposits. Remote to be sure, but very large, very high grade. And I think as those deposits proceed through de-risking, that the mining industry's perception of the Yukon will at least become fuller. Two other deposits that immediately come to mind, which have transacted in the past, Coffee and White Gold, I suspect get built this cycle. The consequence of that is that Yukon, which has been a backwater for mining really since the gold rush, I think will be on more people's radar screens. I don't think that the site visit that you went on will be the last site visit that the Yukon attracts. And I think that the quality of the deposits, the politics of the Yukon, and increased visibility probably raises all ships. You noted in your review, Paul, that the Eagle was far and away the largest source of revenue for the Yukon. It seems to exist now on parasitism against the rest of Canada. And I suspect that the powers that be politically in the Yukon would like to see the resumption of the revenue that they enjoyed from Eagle. I think maybe this fiscal experience they're having will be a wonderful wake-up call in terms of permitting the other deposits, which could swell the Yukon's exchequer. And I think that's a positive that nobody's talking about.
Absolutely. Let me sort of give some sort of more color there, if I may. I spoke with Banyan Gold's CEO, Tara Christie, at the symposium, and there's a lot of exploration underway. So that 7 million ounces is going to grow. There seems to be a lot of appetite at the political level for mining in general to continue to grow in the territory, and for Eagle to come back into production. The government has, and PricewaterhouseCoopers has put a timeline for the sale process of Eagle. It's on their website with very specific timelines for expressions of interest, offers, etc., etc. And one gets the impression that there's a lot of interest in picking up that asset, which will obviously be good for Eagle and potentially for Banyan Gold. And secondly, that the government really wants a larger mining company to take over that asset, one that has the capital and the balance sheet to avoid or to deal with any bumps and mishaps that may occur on the way to bringing that into production. Banyan's got great infrastructure already. It's very close to the town of Mayo. It's got a power line going over the project. In fact, one of the deposit areas is called Power Line for that reason. It has road access, it has water availability, and other things which, compared with other projects and deposits in Yukon, give it a distinct advantage. Let's continue and talk about some of the other companies that I visited. I also visited with Rackla Metals. That's also a Rural Symposium company. It's at a much earlier stage of its development. It's really at the discovery part of the Lassonde curve. They've put together a district scale land package right in eastern Yukon. It's so far east, in fact, that a big part of that is actually in Northwest Territories. Early indications are that it does have district scale potential, including a large geochemical anomaly, rock chip samples, and initial drilling that looks like it's containing a lot of good grade. The company is looking to replicate the success of Snowline Gold. Snowline Gold's success inspired Simon Ridgway, the company founder, to look for low sulfidation gold deposits further east than previously thought. Snowline Gold showed that can be the case, and Simon Ridgway's put Rackla Metals together to look for that as well. And early indications is that he is onto something. It's very early stage, so there's a lot of work to do to define a resource and develop a mine concept around that. It is a bit more of a remote site, although the company says it's not as remote as Snowline is, but it has some pretty steep topography to deal with, as readers might have noticed from the photographs that were included in the Substack report. Very skillful helicopter pilots to get in and out of there and support that. As with Snowline, as I mentioned, infrastructure development will be a critical issue. However, that's a good few years into the future for Rackla. They've got a lot of work to do before that to continue to outline the deposit and to work up to a resource. Rick, what is it you like about Rackla? Why did you invite them to the symposium?
Well, I had the good fortune to buy it a fairly long time ago, and I've enjoyed substantial share price escalation. I need to tell the assembled audience that I've sold enough Rackla that I have the rest for free. When you have a pre-discovery stage company that invests that increases in share price 400 or 500%, before you've answered the unanswered question, the right thing to do is sell enough that you have the rest of your stock for free, which, full and fair disclosure, I have done even before the publication of this letter. I still am a Rackla shareholder, and I'm attracted to a few things. I'm attracted to Simon Ridgway, first of all. I've made money with Simon before. I know him to be innovative and hardworking. I know him to be very shrewd financially, which is a good thing. The concept, which is to say, to utilize the deposit targeting success enjoyed by Snowline in the same bed of rocks, but east and north into the Northwest Territories, I thought was a good idea. that rock belt is obviously very, very, very fertile. The downsides, as you suggest, when Simon describes it as well located, that means if you're a mountain goat, um, it might be relatively well located, but relatively located in terms of that part of the Yukon is damnation by faint praise. And as you suggest, it's cheap. But the possibility exists of a, grassroots multi-million ounce discovery. The surface indications, as you suggest, the geochem, the rock chip samples, are extremely fertile. And I think it's a very good concept. It is a concept now that needs to be validated. If I was looking at Rackla today, I would say, you know what? I'd rather pay double today's price with a drill hole. I want some validation. But I think it's a wonderful idea. And obviously, I have a whole bunch of reasons in the form of share certificates to hope that it's a success.
And that validation should be coming hopefully in the next few weeks as the initial drill results are posted. A quick couple of questions related to Victoria Gold that we can answer. One is Banyan Gold staying away from heap leach processing on purpose because of Victoria's failure? The answer to that is a categoric no. The reason it's looking more at the milling process is because that's higher grade, and that will enable the company to develop a higher grade sort of starter project that requires a milling solution. A report released a few weeks ago clarified or specified that heap leaching per se was not the reason for the Eagle mine failure, and so there's no issues with heap leaching in Yukon in general terms. Okay, let's carry on with our tour. I visited Sitka Gold, which is better located in terms of proximity to available infrastructure than Snowline and than Rackla. It's getting high grade results. Its grade is somewhere between Banyan Gold and Snowline Gold, and that has thrust it into the market's attention. Like Snowline, it has a large drilling program underway with which to grow its more than 2 million ounces of resources that it's already discovered. Rick, Sitka Gold, it wasn't at the Real Symposium, so this may not be a company that you're very familiar with. Any thoughts on Sitka Gold?
I would suggest that the attraction is, as you suggest, the location is less challenging. The infrastructure is pretty good. And a couple geologists who I know have told me that although it's not certain, this is a 2 million ounce deposit that could be a 4 or 5 million ounce deposit. I'm a sucker for big deposits. As you suggest, I'm not a Sitka holder, but I also didn't object to its inclusion in the letter because I think it's a very, very viable exploration target and a very viable speculation target. I hope in the Rural Classroom, discussions involving Joe Mazumdar and others who understand the geological potential of Sitka begins to populate the discussion groups.
Now, Sitka is undertaking a drilling program, tens of thousands of meters, so their potential to rapidly grow the resource is very high. So we could see that 2 million ounces grow very quickly in the coming months and into next year. Now, the pleasant surprise for me on the trip was Gladiator Metals. It's not a company I'd heard a lot about or done a lot of research into before going on the trip. They've got a high-grade copper project very close to territorial capital Whitehorse. They're working up and expanding an historically mined area, and so it has a lot of existing infrastructure, roads, power, water, an airport. Copper is a critical mineral. Copper's just made it onto the, I believe, the USGS list of critical minerals in the United States. It's been getting a lot of attention for that reason. And so this company is potentially going to get a lot of wind in its sails from this. Copper deposits, mineable copper deposits, profitable copper deposits, they're few and far between. They're getting very high grade results. The core looks quite amazing in parts. Rick, any thoughts about Gladiator Metals?
I don't own Gladiator because of my prejudice against smaller deposits. I remember the initial success of Minto when in the Yukon, They were mining a fairly small, fairly high-grade deposit, and the financial results for the first 4 or 5 years, pardon me, were extraordinarily good. So I'll be watching Gladiator with interest. To the extent that exploration at Gladiator begins to add tons, you add a lot of inventory very, very quickly at that kind of grade. And so I'm not opposed to it, but I don't own it. Similarly, I'm not likely to be a financer in the refinancing and restart of Minto for the same reason. I have a prejudice against small deposits. Small deposits haven't treated me well. They have treated other market players very well. And there's a lot to be said for generating free cash flow with low initial capital expenditures and either distributing that cash back to shareholders or using it to grow the company. My own experience has been that small mines carry all the risks of big mines, but small mines generate small rewards. I would prefer, if I'm going to take big risks, to gun for big rewards. I, like you, Paul, do like grade.
Okay, now a couple of projects I didn't visit on this trip, but I have visited in the past. Rick's mentioned them already, Snowline Gold and Fireweed Metals. Both have very large exploration programs underway that continue to generate good results. They're located quite close together in sort of north or sort of central eastern Yukon. And so they could together perhaps mutually overcome some of the infrastructure challenges they face. And they are quite considerable. They will need road development, they will need power development, they will need the development of water sources as well. Fireweed's tungsten potential is unlocking funding for studies and could also unlock funding for building infrastructure in the future. For example, this morning Fireweed announced it has signed a contribution agreement with Natural Resources Canada to support planning for infrastructure improvements in the existing North Canal Corridor, which is the key overland access route close by to where Fireweed operates, and it's McMillan Pass and Mactung projects there. The agreement provides 12.9 million Canadian of funding for Fireweed to advance planning for regional road and transmission line infrastructure improvements. This brings us perhaps to the broader question of infrastructure, which I know I can see a number of you have asked questions about in the chat. What about infrastructure? I think the first answer is it's variable. It depends on where you are, what project it is, and where it's located. Most projects do require some element of infrastructure, whether that's road access, but more importantly, it's power access. Yukon has a grid. It's which is more or less sufficient for its own needs at the moment. For the mining sector to advance and to benefit from grid power and access to cheaper hydroelectric power, a lot of investment is needed, particularly a grid interconnection line to the British Columbia grid. This is something that's going to cost anywhere from $500 million to $1 billion to build. It needs a lot of studying before it can get going. So this is something very much in the long term. One of the critical aspects of this is that Yukon is attracting the attention of some of the larger mining companies, such as B2 Gold, Kinross Gold, Newmont is there, and Rio Tinto. However, these companies, in addition to wanting great projects, they're also very concerned about energy costs and their carbon footprint. And so until an infrastructure, a power infrastructure solution is put in place, that could see some of the big guys hold back from making big investments there. Now, I mentioned Rio Tinto. They're a shareholder in Western Copper and Gold, which has the casino project. It's like Rio Tinto has been delaying for a number of years, making a deeper commitment with Western Copper and Gold and casino, and of course a potential buyout there. And it's largely thought that infrastructure, not having access to hydro, is a key thing that's staying their hand. Now, what's the big deal about having that grid interconnection? It's not necessarily so much being able to get power up from British Columbia, it's being able to export power from Yukon to British Columbia and elsewhere. And that sounds like it's going to be a key aspect to develop more and bigger hydroelectric power sources in Yukon. Several of the First Nations have expressed interest in participating and advancing such projects, but of course they want to be able to sell their power and sell their excess power, and for that they need that grid interconnection to the south. Now, the Yukon government is very keen on developing mining and developing infrastructure that will facilitate it. We mentioned earlier in this particular call, there's a sale process underway for the Eagle mining deposit. I had the opportunity to meet with Curry Dixon, who is the leader of the Yukon party, and who various people I met with think will be the next leader of the territorial government. And he is very, very bullish on the mining sector. He wants to develop more mining. He wants to develop the infrastructure that mining will require. He is very cognizant of, as Rick mentioned earlier, of the big funding gap the territory has since Victoria Gold stopped producing, and he's very keen to have mining projects developed to generate a lot of funding. You mentioned a few things. The population of Yukon continues to grow and grow and grow, and so there needs to be the jobs and the financial wherewithal to support that growing population and to support the health services, the educational services, and water services and the other things that are necessary to sustain that. Rick, what are your thoughts on the importance of developing the infrastructure and perhaps doing that in a coordinated way, maybe amongst several different players?
Paul, when I worked in the Yukon in the 70s, there was no infrastructure. The infrastructure that you described to me is mind-boggling. But what you say is very true. As an example, the Fireweed Snowline project probably requires 130 or 140 kilometers of baseline access road before you do the specific mine access road. That's expensive, and it's going to take a while. The grid expansion at present is a dream. It's a dream that they're trying to flesh out. But when they say 500 million to $1 billion, they actually have no earthly idea how much, and they have no earthly idea when. Certainly, if you fly over the Yukon and you look at the amount of water there, and you look at the drop, you understand the potential for hydropower. But it's worthy to note that winters there are pretty cold. And the amount of power that you generate during the winter from hydro, because the water's frozen, at the time that you need the power the most, is problematic. So the grid power is, they're going to need to import power at a point in time in the winter when British Columbia isn't a great source of power either. They're going to be wanting to export power during freshet when the snow melts, when BC has surplus power. So that's going to be a challenge. I mean, it's really, truly going to be a challenge. I think given the quality of those deposits, the Fireweed deposit is an example, and certainly the Snowline deposit, the Fireweed deposit, which, by the way, I was on 30 years ago in a previous life. These are superb deposits. They are going to get built. The question is, are they going to get built this cycle? I would point out to one other thing about Yukon politics that attracts me, which is to say, the First Nations community, the Indigenous community, which is an important percentage part of the population and is also disproportionately politically powerful in the Yukon, appears to me to be predisposed towards mining. In particular, in the extreme southern part of the Yukon territory, a large part of the top population is Tahltan. And they look at the success that the Tahltan have had with mining in northern BC since 1984, and the incredible success of the Tahltan Development Corporation, and also the success of the Nishka. And what that means is that the benefits of mining are not foreign to them. It isn't, for want of a better phrase, a bunch of white guys saying it's all going to be great. They have experience from people who they are often related to that says that this is the way out, this is the way up. I think that's very important because the permitting around, as an example, grid expansion 10 years ago might have been impossible without the assent of First Nations people. With the First Nations people the permitting for the roads, the permitting for the power, the permitting for water utilization, the aftermath of the pad failure at Victoria. These would have been much bigger political issues in the absence of support from Aboriginal people. But I've been given to understand that there is broad support in the community for mining, which I think will be very helpful. And I think that's an off balance sheet asset that people need to consider when they think about the Yukon.
Absolutely. And referring that comment back to Eagle and Victoria Gold, my understanding is the First Nations on that project area are very keen for a new actor to come in and take the mine ahead again. Regarding Eagle, Rick, how critical do you think it is or isn't about, one, whether the government is actually successful in finding a new owner for that, and two, who that new owner is? If it is a larger mining company, to what extent, how important would that be?
Well, I think the bankruptcy was important because the capital stack at Eagle was lousy. The financing was cobbled together hither and yon, and there were a lot of calls on the free cash flow. All of those existing claims are now subordinated to a $200 million environmental claim. But the capital stack gets to get cleaned up. If the existing victims, Orion et al., decide that they want to resurrect it, they can make a bid, but they have to make a bid that's competitive with everybody else, which means that the capital stack around the Eagle mine, which was horrific, all gets cleaned up in receivership. And I think that'll go a long way to attracting a bidder. One of the difficulties that mine had, in addition to being, of course, behind schedule, ahead, beyond budget, and not making their AASC numbers, is there was too many calls on the cash coming out of it as a consequence of the capital stack. Those problems go away. It's important to note, too, that mine operated in a very different gold price environment that we're talking about now. I'm highly confident that the Eagle mine gets bought and recapitalized. People won't like the price it gets bought for because whoever buys it has to stand in the way of a remediation bill that is conservatively estimated at 200 million Canadian dollars.
Well, that's a very important point. The recuperation, the rehabilitation budget seems to have grown and grown and grown over the past year. There's been a question about the shareholders, Victoria Gold shareholders, and I think I'm correct in saying that they're effectively their shares are worthless now. So they've been the reorganization, the liquidation that's basically wiped out retail investors and other stockholders. Now, Eagle isn't the only mining project or on sale in Yukon. Newmont's coffee deposit is Newmont has that up for sale. What kind of company do you think that could appeal to, Rick?
I think coffee gets bought and built. I'm not sure who it would appeal to. There are companies in that snack bracket who have northern building experience. I'm thinking B2 as an example. Stephen Dean's team from Artemis, once they achieve nameplate capacity, not merely economic completion, but nameplate capacity, could probably easily relocate and build that. But I think first of all, Newmont is wise to sell it because it's too small to matter to Newmont, and they shouldn't divert their time and attention from, as an example, the Northern Nevada goldfields to do coffee. But coffee is a discrete deposit with grade, a bit of access challenge, but it's definitely buildable, and there are definitely teams out there that could do it. I think it's too small, as an example, to appeal to Agnico Eagle, who doesn't have any Yukon infrastructure. Obviously, it's too small to appeal to Newmont, even though they do have regional infrastructure in northern BC. But I wouldn't rule out necessarily the Kinrosses of the world. It may be too small for them. My suspicion is that it will be built by an experienced team with experienced financial backers in a company that may be formed like Artemis was to build it.
I think that's a very shrewd observation, Rick. Newmont's done a lot of work there. They've done it to a high level. So, it's not quite ready to go, but it's a long way to getting there. So whoever does buy that will have a pretty robust project that's well understood and well defined with which to take forward a development plan. There's many other companies operating and exploring in Yukon, Rick. In addition to the ones that I saw, in addition to Snowline, in addition to Fireweed, who else are you keeping an eye on in Yukon?
I think any discussion of exploration in the Yukon can't occur without talking about strategic. Strategic has been generating projects, spinning off companies, active in the Yukon my entire adult life. It's backed by a consulting group in Vancouver called Archer Cathro, who were employed at Keno Hill. The territorial mining database was literally developed by Archer Cathro and given to the Yukon government. So probably the best database in the territory belongs to Archer Cathro and as a consequence strategic. So I don't think that you could have an exploration discussion in Yukon that didn't include strategic and the Archer Cathro group.
Okay. Whilst we've been talking about Rio Tinto as one of the bigger companies that are expressing interest in the territory, Rio obviously put out some big news today about a management restructure. A bit of a sidestep, I know, Rick, but permit me that. What's your view of the restructure there? And, you know, Rio seems to have they've gone heavily into lithium in recent years. And then just as that's sort of getting their foot under the door there, the CEO who really pushed that strategy leaves. With the management restructure, are we going to see Rio perhaps revisit its lithium strategy?
I think it's too early to tell, but I suspect that might be the case. I like the idea that Rio is doing or considering doing what Newmont just did, which is to say bundling off the assets that are too small to matter and turning them into cash, focusing on their core business. Rio also indicated that they are going to renew their global exploration effort. It's important to remember that 30 or 40 years ago, Rio was the most highly regarded exploration company in the world. That was a core franchise. Whether or not they can reacquire that franchise is a very different circumstance. When you're talking about Rio, it's so big that it's difficult to get your arms around. Is it a copper company? Well, from a copper perspective, yes. Is it an iron ore company? And I think part of this restructuring is all about at once figuring out who they are exactly, and letting the market know who they were exactly. They had the luxury for the last 10 years of swimming in cash from their iron business. And perhaps they should have returned more to shareholders and created less distractions for themselves. I assume that this restructuring is all about eliminating the distractions and eliminating the market's distraction as to what Newmont really is. Rio Tinto has undergone, not Rio Tinto, I'm sorry, BHP has undergone the same process for 10 years. And I would suggest is a better company for it.
Okay. Now, another producer we haven't yet mentioned in Yukon is Hecla Mining. They have the Keno Silver Hill district. And I mention this because one of our next issues of the Rural Investment Newsletter is likely to be on silver. So let's bring in silver in Yukon. What are your thoughts on Hecla?
Hecla is a company that has not been a great capital allocator over 20 years. I would suggest that they do have a core competency in narrow vein, high grade underground mining, but they've been, let's say that they've tried a lot of things. Some of them have worked, some of them haven't worked. I have a fondness for Keno Hill. The company that they bought out, I was a founder of, and I did very well in the early 1990s bull market as a consequence of that. Keno Hill has produced, if my memory serves me well, about 300 million ounces, all from high-grade veins. It's unlikely, first of all, that the covered veins, those which didn't come to surface, are present and could be found. It's also likely that there are places where that high-grade mineralization, where the rock preparation was right, blew out. And it's likely that there are lower grade halos, bulk silver targets that could be exploited. Whether or not Hecla is the company that does that is a different thing. The first thing that you know about that you need to know about Hecla is, despite the fact that they haven't been great capital allocators for a very long time, they are a brand name for silver. When the silver price goes up, and I am 100% certain that in this market the silver price will go up, the public fondness, the equity fondness, gets expressed through Hecla and Coeur d'Alene, the two big ticket American silver names. So perhaps irrespective of merit, one would expect Hecla to do well in a sort of silver bull market, and I expect that silver bull market.
Okay, now while we're sort of vaguely on the subject of valuation, looking at Yukon in general, there's a couple of big catalysts out there. One, as we've mentioned, is the potential sale of Eagle, and two, the potential sale of Coffee. What sort of lift on valuations may be possible if those processes are concluded successfully? Will that sort of take a lot of perceived risk of Yukon away?
I'm going to pass on that question. Perhaps we can revisit that question in the real classroom at some point in time. I haven't had enough time to think about it. There's a lot of activity in the Yukon. It's important to note that the Nisga'a Nation and companies affiliated with Frank Giustra are putting Minto back into production too. I suspect that the first catalyst there will be the sale of the Eagle Mine, the restoration of the Eagle Mine. I think that'll go a long way inside and outside of the Yukon to remove any remaining cloud. To the extent that sooner rather than later Coffee gets bought too, that would really reinforce perception, first of all. But the second thing it might do is allow whoever acquires Coffee, or for that matter, whoever acquires Eagle, to establish a regional franchise, to begin to look more carefully in that jurisdiction because they're already there. As to being able to quantify it, Paul, I haven't thought long enough about it to answer that question with a straight face.
Okay, it sounds like you think there could be let's say, a first mover advantage for somebody that does build a mine and puts in infrastructure, depending, of course, on its location. They'll be able to sort of suck in some other things, some of the other exploration development projects in the territory.
Whether or not that's true, they may believe it. Institutional bias, the way institutional bias works. It may be that if a company has decided that socially and politically that Yukon is a good fit, and they make an investment there, that they will be tempted to make more investments because they feel welcome there.
Okay. Well, I think we've gone through most of the questions related to Yukon in the chat, and I've gone through the various companies that projects have visited. So with that being the case, let's draw an end to this particular Q&A. Rick, thank you as always for joining me in discussion. Always good to get your insights.
Paul, I would ask the listeners to this to tell us what they might like us to write about in the future. You and I decide what we're interested in, but the truth is that we serve a very broad audience. And it would be useful to get leadership and guidance from the audience as to what we might write about. Now, understand that some ideas that might be very good ideas, Paul and I decide that we aren't competent to discuss. But we would very much look to the leadership, look to the audience, pardon me, for leadership around the topics that we might do future issues on.
Absolutely. So please email in your investment themes of choice. Let's phrase it that way. And we'll see what we can do. Rick, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. Looking forward to the next one, which will hopefully be in a month or so's time. Before that, I'll be attending the Precious Metal Summit in Beaver Creek in about 2 weeks, and then following out the America's Gold Forum. So hopefully getting a lot of good knowledge and insight about the precious metals developers and producers. So stay tuned for more from the Real Investment Newsletter.